This is the Fenway Rundown. I'm Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam here as we continue our off-season coverage. Red Sox still not doing much. We do have some news on the coaching staff to get into on this Thursday, October 10th. You heard our long and pretty busy, action-packed mailbag episode on Tuesday. We'll have plenty of those throughout the offseason to ask for questions. And how would one be part of that, Sean?
Well, one would do that, Chris, by simply texting the word join to 617-751-6257. And then one would click on the link to subscribe, and that would provide one with a free 14-day trial period, after which one would need to pony up $4.99 monthly.
So, as a table setter for the offseason, this will qualify under self-promotion a little bit, but we have, and by that I mean I have been writing a series of roster analysis on the site. The fourth one went up today on the rotation. So if you want to, if you haven't been thinking about the Red Sox much over the last 10 days and want to, see, okay, who's coming back, who's not, who could they target? We did catchers on Monday, then infield, then outfield. Today was rotation. Tomorrow will be bullpen. It's a lot of work and a lot of words, but appreciate those who have read those, subscribed because of those, all that type of stuff, and obviously we'll have a lot to talk about on that topic for months to come. We are going to get to the coaching staff first, though. The news broke last night. The Red Sox have moved on from some of the headlines said six coaches. Really, it's three, and then three kind of background parts.
Support people.
Right. Not to take away from the fact they lost their job, but as Sean wrote in the headline for MassLive last night, the Red Sox fire three coaches, but principals returning to staff. That was a more professional way of writing my headline suggestion, which was, but no big names get canned. So the three coaches that get let go, first base coach Andy Fox, who is also the infield instructor, the bullpen coach Kevin Walker, and one of the two assistant hitting coaches, Luis Ortiz. That leaves the staff, as I said, the big names. Andrew Bailey was not going anywhere. Kyle Hudson, the third base coach and the outfield and base running coordinator, has done a pretty good job since he's joined. Jason Varitek remains, of course, and bench coach Ramon Vasquez, as well as the assistant hitting coach Ben Rosenthal. And Pete Fatsi, the hitting coach, remains in his job, which that was a little bit in question. We talked about that on previous pods. He stays. Three coaches get let go, as well as strength and conditioning coach Ben Chadwick, mental skills coach Ray Fuentes, who was an addition a few years ago, and longtime bullpen catcher Manny Martinez, who's been with the organization for at least as long as I've been on the beat, Sean, probably dating back 15, 20 years. So on all of these, look, it's not earth-shattering news. We thought there would be some moves around the margins. If you think about it, 2 years ago when the Red Sox had their first 78 and 84 season, there were going to be no changes. The only change that was made, Will Venable left for Texas to work with Bochy, and Kyle Hudson did join the staff. But this year, in terms of quantity, a lot of moving parts. In terms of big name news, not a lot, and I think you could expect that after they changed the pitching coach last year, considering how close Alex Cora is to Ramon Vasquez. But any big takeaways or thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that not to dismiss the importance or significance of the three coaches who were let go, but we had guessed in recent episodes that it might look a little something like this. We specifically mentioned Kevin Walker in the bullpen, who might have been in jeopardy because of the bullpen's performance, particularly in the second half when they led all of Major League Baseball in blown saves. When you think about it, it's kind of silly to blame the bullpen coach for the performance of the relievers. In the whole, those guys come under the purview of Andrew Bailey. He is the pitching coach, and he's in charge of all 13 guys on that pitching staff. But sometimes for appearance sake, sometimes for narrative, there are going to be changes when a team doesn't reach the postseason or has an underachieving season, the way the Red Sox did in 2024, finishing at 500. And so you would expect some shakeup, but the shakeup we saw was relatively minor. Among the sort of traditional coaching staff positions. First base coach is kind of the bottom rung. It is thought to be the least impactful of those coaching positions. At third base, Hudson has much more input into the outfield and base running and the third base coaching duties. We knew that Fatsy and Bailey were unlikely to go anywhere. Certainly, Veritek is a fixture. So I can't say that I'm surprised at anything that's gone on here. We could say that these changes are almost ornamental, that they knew they had to do some shakeup, but it wasn't significant and it didn't impact most of the major figures or any of the major figures on the coaching staff. Those guys are all coming back. I should point out that there's some uncertainty about the length of some of these deals and whether guys are on multi-year deals and thus automatically come back. But I was told by somebody who would know last night that that while some crossing of T's and dotting of I's might remain on a few individual cases, the expectation for now is that there will be no others leaving the coaching staff. Obviously, there are 3 vacancies plus the 3 support roles that were terminated.
Yeah, and when you come and bring up contracts, I don't know exactly where everybody was in terms of their contracts, but those deals are usually 2 years, I believe. I know it comes and goes, depends. Veritek has a longer deal, those types of things, but Ortiz was on his second year. Fox was on his third year, and I think Walker had been 5 on the major league coaching staff. So
Right.
odd numbers and even numbers in there. We're not sure who exactly was on an expiring deal. Maybe they wanted to pursue other opportunities. We do have fire in there because that's kind of what it looks like. But we don't really know. And I think, the takeaways for me are this. Andy Fox was in charge of the infield defense, just like Carlos Fables was last year. It was still bad, just like it was a year ago and in years past. And, I think that's just it feels like they need like a veteran guru to come in, someone who's just like, I know Ron Washington's not walking through that door because he's managing in Anaheim, but who's that guy? Perry Hill, who's like one
Perry
of the
Hill
old school.
is acknowledged as one of
Yeah.
the great infield instructors, and he's working somewhere. I don't remember
Yeah,
where.
I'm
What?
just shooting out names, but like somebody
Yep.
like who can really fix that issue.
Yep.
The assistant hitting coach, the bullpen coach, their assistants down the line a little bit, and then as I said, Manny Martinez, a guy who's been around for a very long time. Andy Fox and Kevin Walker weren't on the staff long, but they were in the organizations for a while, as you wrote yesterday. After digging into the trusty media guide, Fox had been part of the organization for 14 years. And Walker had spent 16 seasons with the Red Sox, which
I,
is,
I,
pretty notable
I
to me.
I wonder now if this does not provide an opening maybe for Chad Tracy to be promoted from manager at Worcester the last few years. He is highly respected. In fact, a Baseball America poll at the end of the year of coaches and managers in the International League identified him as the top managerial prospect, meaning major league managerial prospect in the International League. Typically, teams like to reward loyalty and good service within their organization in the minor leagues with a promotion to the big leagues. It would be a huge increase in both salary and benefits and major league pension and all those things that are valuable
And
to these guys.
service time, which you don't realize, but yes.
Yeah, well, a service time working toward a pension is
Right.
that's kind of what I was talking about. Um, so, that would be a big step up for Tracy in terms of security. We'll see if he gets put into that first base coach's spot. They could make other internal promotions or they could hire from the outside. Usually, coaching staffs are assembled with some combination of input from the manager and the head of baseball operations. So there may be some people from the Cubs organization that Craig Breslow would like to bring in. There may be other friends within the game that Alex Cora might have his eyes on. So we'll see how this unfolds. But really, none of the 3 major coaching spots, assistant hitting, first base, and bullpen, are marquee positions, but still have to be have to be filled here in the coming weeks and months.
And a name just interesting to throw out, Mike Napoli did get fired by the Cubs after being their first base coach, a guy that Craig Breslow played with in 2013, worked with again on the Cubs staff. I think sometimes where we and the fan base and other media members are too quick to say, well, they know each other, so they must be super tight and they must want to work together. Maybe Breslow and Napoli don't get along. We don't know. We have no idea, but there is obviously connection and familiarity there. As well as with some other guys from kind of that era of Red Sox baseball. David Ross, I think, is still unemployed out there. Like you never know where some of these guys are going to land. The first base coach, as Sean mentioned, probably the most notable of the three. I do think that, if there are any takeaways from this, as I was kind of talking about, Walker spending 16 years with the organization, Fox with 14, the bullpen catcher, Manny Martinez, some of these people there, and a lot of the people that, were reported to be fired or let go from the kind of the support staff earlier on. I want to find this, Alex Spear wrote about it a few weeks ago. Longtime instructors and scouts, Ralph Truhl, who'd been with the organization, it's Truhl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had been with the organization since '96. Walter Miranda, who had been with the organization since 2000. Pitching coordinator Chris Mears, who had been with the organization since '07. Scouts who had been here since '03 and '06. It seems like Craig Breslow is, trying to make his own mark on the margins, which for an organization that has been, mediocre and bad for the last 5 years, you can understand. There's been no high-level front office changes other than Taboni, who was already here. The manager is obviously in place, and at the end of the day, the roster is going to matter the most. But I do think, those things mixed with, some of the kind of more public-facing, behind-the-scenes people that's I guess an oxymoron, but you know what I mean. Dave Meller, Pam Ken, Billy Weiss, obviously Joe Castiglione. These are not moves that are going to, impact wins and losses, at least in that regard. They're not baseball operations staff. I think there just is this offseason more than I can remember on the beat. I don't know if changing of the guard is the right way to put it, but definitely a huge influx of, longtime employees moving on.
Yeah. Although we should mention that all the four names you just mentioned, Joe
Right.
Castiglione, Pam Ken, Dave Meller, and
Billy Weiss.
Billy Weiss, are all leaving of their own accord
Yeah.
to go
I'm just
do
saying
other
it
things.
just there's a lot
Right,
of
right.
there's a lot
Joe
of
and Dave are,
positions to be
yep,
fired to be
yep.
filled by the
Turnover.
organization across the way, and
Yep. There
um
is turnover.
I think on the baseball side of things, removing those four people, like the scouts, the longtime instructors, Andy Fox, Walker, like there's kind of methodology and redundancy that
Institutional knowledge.
happens in those roles that kind of it becomes an echo chamber, I'm sure at times. And Breslow wants to make his mark. Again, he hasn't brought in this GM from the outside or made crazy coaching staff changes beyond these, but I think it's notable you're seeing a lot of people who have been around and a lot of people that, of course, I think we know, that the average fan wouldn't because we're around the team, we're in spring training for a lot. But
Yep.
but it's just, a lot of longevity out the door.
Also worth noting that a lot of the bigger dismissals on the coaching staff last year, which included Dave Bush being terminated and Carlos Febles, as you mentioned, as the third base coach, those were done before the search for a baseball executive was completed. So that was done by the infrastructure that remained in baseball ops. I suppose it's possible. Well, no, really, the calendar doesn't suggest that
Right.
Breslow had any hand in those. They were all executed moves within the first few weeks of the off season, and he wasn't brought on until the very end of the month into early November. So those were done prior to his hiring.
Right. So, that's worth covering. Again, I don't think it's seismic changes, but they brought in Andrew Bailey and Justin Willard last year to kind of revamp the whole pitching infrastructure. Kevin Walker was a holdover. Maybe those guys get their own guy. That's Justin Willard is in uniform sometimes at the affiliates, other times, but has a huge, huge role in this. Just interesting to see as Breslow makes his mark on the organization. And of course, potential front office changes still, TBD. Haven't heard much on those. I want to get your thoughts, Sean, as well as share some on what we've seen in the postseason so far from a Red Sox angle. As we sit here and record this on October 10th, the Mets have punched their ticket to the NLDS. There are, three series still going on. The Dodgers and the Padres has been great theater across the board. They will go to a game 5 tomorrow night at Dodger Stadium. I'm sure tickets for that will be cheap. The Guardians and Tigers play game 4 today, with Detroit having a chance to move on, and the Yankees and the Royals as well as 8 o'clock have a chance to move on. Are there any, big takeaways, whether it be from ex-Red Sox or anything about, Red Sox related angles that you've seen for the first half-ish of the playoffs so far?
Yeah, well, let's tackle the Philadelphia Phillies, who are, of course, run by Dave Dombrowski, former GM here and chief baseball officer or president of baseball operations. Um, it's a little concerning if you're Dave Dombrowski when you see the trajectory of the franchise the last few years. They went from getting to the World Series to losing in the AL and the NLCS to now losing in the NLDS. Uh, when you see a team getting eliminated one round earlier for a stretch of 3 years, that's usually a sign that the arrow is pointed down. And that is largely, as often happens with Dombrowski constructed teams, a veteran team that is only going to get older with a lot of long term commitments to Bryce Harper, to Trey Turner, to the two starters that they recently extended, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. You don't see a lot of youth there. You've got Stott, who's in his 20s still. You've got Marsh, who's relatively young, but Real Muto, Harper.
Earl Muto got a huge deal too. Castellanos got a huge deal. Schwarber,
Right,
Walker.
right.
I mean,
So they're
there's a lot
locked
of big
into a
time
lot of
deals
these
on the
guys.
board.
They're locked into a lot of these guys as they get into their early and mid 30s. And you wonder if that window isn't closing a little bit for Dombrowski and the Phillies to secure that elusive world championship. That's been their model. They've made no secret from owner John Middleton on down that they are going for it all. This is not about getting into the playoffs or securing a wild card spot. They want a World Series. They came close 2 years ago. They fell somewhat short a year ago, and this year they didn't get out of the division series. Another trend that's happening here is once again, we're seeing teams that win their divisions not do well in the division series. This year, we're in a position where you could easily have the Dodgers lose on game 5. You've already seen one division champ, the Phillies, get eliminated in the division series. The Yankees are in control and could close things out tonight, being up 2-1 as a division series winner. Houston won a division and didn't get a bye because they were ranked third, but they got knocked off in the early going. Cleveland is in danger, having had a bye from the wild card of getting knocked off. So I wonder if we're going to start re-examining that playoff format and wondering whether the layoff for teams getting first round buys is a negative rather than a positive. That's a trend that we've seen for a few years now.
I think the whole format is too short in terms of what these series are. Like I think a best of, you win in the case of some of these teams. The Dodgers win 98 games. The Phillies that you talked about won 95, and you lose 3 out of 4, which every team does throughout the season, and it's all of a sudden over. Like I understand you're supposed to build your roster for that, but in a game and in a sport where parity is up and any given day anybody can win. And like, just to me, I'd like to see a 7 game series in the division series. There's really kind of almost no reason for there not to be. Like
Well,
I just don't.
there is a very big reason. It's the calendar. I mean, if
But
you
we're
know
already. I
you
mean, at this point, we're already.
well, we're talking about the potential for 3 more days, 2 more games and an off day. So you're either starting the season even earlier than they are, which is the last week of March, or you're extending the season past the first few days of November. And remember, there are TV elements to consider here. Once you get a little deeper in November, you're into a sweeps period. And while the World Series does pretty well for Fox as a prime time event, and it's kind of a lost leader for them because it allows them to showcase a lot of their fall programming and promote that within the game. It is not such a big ratings winner that a network would necessarily want it in sweeps week. And if you push it another 3 days, that's what you're looking at, to say nothing of the weather issues getting into cities in the Northeast in now, deep into the first week of November. So there are impediments to expanding the postseason in terms of length.
Well, they just did it with the wild card series, and kind of condensed everything in that first week. So, I mean, I just to me looking at the Mets obviously get hot and they win that doubleheader. They won one of those games to clinch. They then win the wild card series fast, and then get into this 3 out of 4 against the Phillies. It's like to me, they obviously deserve it. You can't take it away. But these teams that, win 95 games, it just feels like a quick hook at the start of all of it.
It is a quick hook, but it's a better situation than the one and done wild card game that we had for a number of years. And, the other thing you have to consider is, where does it stop? This is kind of like we hear it every spring with the NCAA tournament. Oh, they should expand past 64. Well, guess what? If they added another whatever number of teams works mathematically, there'd be teams saying, oh, we were team 75 and we should have gotten in. And if you go from 5 to 7 in the division series, then people are going to say, well, how can you have a 3 game wild card series? That's not fair. That should be best of 5, or that should be best of 7. Where does it stop when you start tinkering and expanding earlier series?
Right. Well, I'm sure that there'll be
And
more postseason teams in, and they'll get expanded and expanded and expanded to hell anyway. So, in 4 years, if we have this discussion, it'll probably be a different tournament anyway.
I promise you, we will not be having this discussion in 4 years. You'll
That's
be
not you
talking to
threat.
your you'll be talking to yourself if you're having that discussion.
That's not a threat to fire. Okay, it's a retirement. I was going to say joke. It's not a joke at all. It's completely dead serious. We'll talk about another old man who's hanging on, Tito Francona.
Oh, that's a
That's
nice segue.
that's
Thank
a
you.
perfect one. You obviously have a great relationship with him. We've had him on the pod a couple times, or at least twice with me, and maybe 3 times over the last 2 years or so. He's going to Cincinnati. You always told me, Sean, was someone who knows him super well. He cannot let this go. He always has to scratch the competitive itch. He's literally and legitimately addicted to baseball and the games and all of that. So, in that vein, I guess you can't be that surprised that he's back in.
No, I thought it might take another year. I thought he might take 2 years to refresh and rejuvenate and get healthy and see how he was doing then. But that itch returned pretty quickly, sooner than I thought. It does not surprise me that he's back. If you recall, when we talked to him last off season, I said, are you ready to close the door and say you'll never manage? And he pulled up short there and wouldn't do that. And then I went back and listened to the last appearance he made on the Fenway Rundown, which was in May, and listened to him trying to convince me that he was perfectly content. And nope, yep, while the game is great and I owe it a lot and miss some people, I'm doing fine. I don't miss it. Uh, you know, that was May. And obviously, September was different for him, having been away from the game for only the second year. And even that other year, which was 2012, he was around the game a lot as ESPN's Sunday night analyst. He traveled, he saw games, he was at the ballpark, he had day to day interaction with players and managers and people he missed. This was more isolation. He he wanted to respect the Guardians and not hang around Stephen Vogt and make it look like he was looking over his shoulder. So, to the best of my knowledge, he did not even show up in spring training, which was in Arizona, where he lives now. He did not, I don't think, visit the Guardians during the year, although there was some contact, regular contact between he and Vogt, offering some advice when it was asked. That's no surprise, but obviously he couldn't stay away, and he's not going to a great situation. This is not, you know,
They have some good young players.
what they do, but this is not being handed the keys of the 2004 Red Sox, which came within a couple of innings of winning the pennant. That was unusual because usually you don't have a managerial change after you win 90 plus games and come within an inning or two of going to the World Series. But Grady Little moved on, and Tito was fortunate enough to inherit a very good roster and knew exactly what to do with it and did win with it. This is far from that. This is a team that has, I think, made 2 postseason appearances in the last 15 or 20 years. They are a small payroll team. Of course, he's used to that in Cleveland. The Guardians weren't much different, but it goes to show that that kind of stuff isn't important to him. He's not resume building and figuring where can I get my third World Series ring, although that's his goal ultimately, as it is at the start of every year. But he wasn't shopping around for a soft landing spot. The Reds called. He had played there. He has some history with the franchise going back a while, and he wanted back in. And this was the team that reached out to him, and he was only too ready to return. We wish him the best of luck and hope that he's healthy enough to undertake this, because we all know this is a guy who has had something like 30 something surgeries on every
40
conceivable.
plus.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure he's lost track. I know I have. And that's the risk here, that you get back into the day-to-day commitment. We know how draining it is to be a major league manager in 2025, with all the duties in terms of media and being the face of the franchise. They're going to ask him to be that more than ever. That's a team that doesn't draw well necessarily. It has a great baseball history, that city and franchise, but not over the last 20 years. And he'll be tasked with making them competitive and relevant again. It's a lot to ask for somebody who's 65 years old and has had the kind of health issues he has over the last 10 years.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that we will check in with him at some point before opening day. The newest manager of the Reds, Terry Francona. That's the Fenway rundown for today. Not as action-packed as the mailbag last week, but that's what it is. And we will be back next week with a couple more episodes as always. Probably a guest or two. We'll see where the world takes us and where the Red Sox do. Sean, one more time, how do they sign up, the good people at home, for the Fenway Rundown Insider Text?
They do that by texting the word join to 617-751-6257 and then click on the link to subscribe. That will give you a free 14-day trial period. You'll see that we hit breaking news, answer questions, take questions for future mailbag editions, all kinds of fun surrounding, excuse me, Red Sox news and information. Free for 14 days, $4.99 per month after that.